My name is Mara, and for 16 years, I scrubbed the marble floors of the Whitmore mansion while my relatives walked across them in designer heels, treating me like I was invisible. They took me in at age 10 after my mother died, not as family but as free labor, reminding me daily that I should be grateful for the scraps they threw my way. But the day their lawyer read my great-aunt Evelyn's will, the silence in that room was so complete you could hear my heart hammering as he spoke the words that changed everything. To my only daughter, Mara Evelyn, I leave everything. The teacup slipping from Lucinda's fingers and shattering on the floor was the sound of my whole world shifting, because the woman they dismissed as senile had been playing chess while they were playing checkers, and she'd just declared checkmate from beyond the grave. If you're watching this video right now, I'd love to know where you're from. Drop it in the comment section below. Hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories like this. The marble floor gleamed like a mirror beneath Mara's knees, reflecting her tired face back at her through the sheen of lemon-scented polish. 26 years old, and still on her hands and knees in the Whitmore mansion, scrubbing away invisible imperfections that only Lucinda seemed able to detect. From the parlor, Clara's voice pierced through the morning quiet like a needle through silk. Mother! Mother! Look at this! Clara stormed into the foyer, her designer heels clicking against the very floor Mara had just finished. Each step left a small scuff mark. My manicurist chipped my nail. Can you believe the incompetence? Mara kept her head down, moving her cloth in slow, methodical circles. She'd learned long ago that invisibility was her greatest asset in this house. Clara's complaints washed over her like white noise, the same frequency of entitlement that had soundtracked the last 16 years of her life. Mara, Lucinda's sharp voice cut through her thoughts. When you're done there, the silver needs polishing. We have guests coming for dinner. Yes, ma'am, Mara replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Always, ma'am. Never Aunt Lucinda, though technically that's what she was or something like it. The family tree was complicated, twisted with branches that bore fruit for some and thorns for others. As she gathered her cleaning supplies, Mara's mind drifted back to that first day, when she was just 10 years old, standing on this very threshold with nothing but a battered suitcase and eyes still swollen from crying. Her mother had been dead for 3 days. The cancer had taken her quickly, mercifully, the social worker had said. As if there was any mercy in leaving a child alone in the world. We'll raise her, Lucinda had told the social worker, her smile practiced and hollow. Family takes care of family. But raising, Mara learned, had a different definition in the Whitmore household. It meant a small room in the servants' quarters, not the guest bedrooms upstairs. It meant hand-me-down clothes from Clara, always 2 sizes too big or too small, never quite right. It meant sitting at the kitchen table for meals while the family dined in the formal dining room. It meant chores that began before dawn and ended long after the family had retired for the evening. There were no birthday parties for Mara. No photos of her on the mantelpiece among the professional portraits of Clara at various stages of her privileged childhood. No parent-teacher conferences or school plays attended. She was a ghost that cleaned and cooked and served, acknowledged only when something needed doing. The only light in those dark early years had been Aunt Evelyn. Evelyn was Lucinda's older sister, though you'd never know it from how differently they treated the world. Where Lucinda was all sharp edges and calculating looks, Evelyn was soft wisdom and knowing smiles. She lived in the cottage at the edge of the property, a deliberate choice, Mara later understood, to maintain distance from her sister's poisonous influence. Come here, child, Evelyn would call from her garden when she spotted Mara hauling laundry or trimming hedges. Let me teach you something useful. And she did. In stolen hours between chores, Evelyn taught Mara poetry, Langston Hughes, Maya Angelou, Emily Dickinson. She taught her chess, delighting when Mara began to beat her after just 6 months. She taught her French, practicing conversations over tea that Mara wasn't supposed to be drinking, in a parlor she wasn't supposed to be sitting in. You're not just a maid to me, Evelyn said one afternoon when Mara was 15, looking up from the chessboard where Mara had just placed her in checkmate. You have a mind that deserves to be nurtured, not wasted on people who can't see your worth. Those words had sustained Mara through the years that followed. Through Clara's cruel pranks, the time she accidentally spilled red wine on Mara's only good dress before she was supposed to go to the library. Through Lucinda's constant reminders that Mara should be grateful for the roof over her head, as if gratitude could fill an empty stomach or heal a broken spirit. Now, at 26, Mara had carved out a small life for herself. She worked part-time at the public library, a job Evelyn had helped her secure despite Lucinda's protests. The pay was minimal, barely enough to save anything after contributing to household expenses that Lucinda insisted upon, but it gave her hours of peace among books and people who saw her as more than furniture. "Your hours are being cut," Lucinda announced one evening, not looking up from her tablet as Mara served dinner. The library called. "I told him you have family obligations." Mara's hand trembled slightly as she set down the serving dish. "But Mrs. Whitmore, that job." "Family comes first," Lucinda interrupted, though the irony of those words coming from her lips seemed lost on everyone but Mara. "Besides, we don't pay you to work elsewhere. You live here free of charge." Free of charge. As if the 16 years of unpaid labor meant nothing. As if the childhood stolen from her had no value. Mara bit her tongue, tasting blood and swallowed words. That night, she found Evelyn in the cottage, reading by lamplight. The older woman had grown frail in recent months, her hands shaking slightly as she turned pages. "They cut my hours," Mara said quietly, sinking into the chair across from her. Evelyn looked up, her eyes sharp despite her failing body. "The cage is getting smaller. I don't know how much longer I can do this." "You won't have to," Evelyn said, reaching across to squeeze Mara's hand. "There's something I want to change. Something important. Just trust me." The next morning, Mara found Evelyn collapsed in her garden, face pale among the roses she loved. Mara's scream brought Lucinda running, but it was Mara who held Evelyn's head in her lap, Mara who whispered soothing words as they waited for the ambulance, Mara whose tears fell on Evelyn's weathered cheeks. Evelyn recovered, but she was changed. There was an urgency to her now, a determination that seemed to burn through her frailty. "I need you to take me somewhere," she told Mara a week later. "Don't tell anyone." They took a cab to downtown, to a law firm with marble columns and a brass nameplate. Evelyn moved slowly but purposefully, clutching a sealed envelope. She handed it to the receptionist with specific instructions while Mara waited, confused but trusting. "What was that about?" Mara asked as they rode home. "Insurance," Evelyn replied, patting Mara's hand. "For your future." 3 days later, Evelyn died in her sleep. Clara's response was to complain about having to wear black to the funeral. Lucinda's was to immediately begin calculating the estate value. "Well, the old woman had no heirs," Lucinda said over breakfast, as if Evelyn hadn't been her sister, as if her body wasn't still warm in the morgue. "I suppose it'll all come to us. Clara, we should look at renovating that cottage. Maybe a pool house." Mara stood in the corner, holding a tray of fresh coffee, and felt something inside her break. Not shatter, she was too tired for drama, but crack, like ice under spring sun. Change was coming. She could feel it in the air, in the way the lawyer had looked at her when Evelyn handed over that envelope, in the last words Evelyn had whispered. "Trust me." The morning of the will reading, Lucinda transformed the mansion into a stage for her anticipated triumph. She'd invited cousins, distant relatives, anyone who might witness her moment of inheritance. The champagne was already chilling. "Mara, make sure the crystal is spotless," she commanded, adjusting her pearl necklace in the mirror. "And wear your uniform. We want everything proper for the lawyers." Clara laughed from the sofa, where she was scrolling through her phone. "God, can you imagine? She's actually going to serve tea at a will reading. How perfectly Dickensian." "It's what she's here for," Lucinda replied smoothly. "Everyone has their place." Mara tied her apron with steady hands, though inside, her heart was racing. She'd found things while cleaning Evelyn's cottage, letters, documents, photographs, that suggested stories untold. But she'd learned long ago that hope was a luxury she couldn't afford. Better to expect nothing and be surprised than to hope and be crushed. The lawyer's office was all dark wood and leather, the smell of old money and older secrets. Mr. Carter, a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, had arranged chairs in a semicircle. Lucinda and Clara took the center seats, of course. The cousins flanked them like courtiers around a queen. "Mara, the tea," Lucinda said without looking at her. Mara moved to the side table where a service had been arranged, her hands automatically going through the motions. Pour, sugar, cream, serve. She'd done this 10,000 times. But she noticed Mr. Carter watching her, his expression unreadable. "Even at a reading, she's got her apron on," Clara announced to the room, eliciting uncomfortable chuckles from the cousins. "Aunt Evelyn would have found that amusing, don't you think? Shall we begin?" Mr. Carter interrupted, his voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. He opened a leather folder, pulling out an envelope with Evelyn's seal. The paper whispered as he unfolded it, and Mara found herself holding her breath. "The last will and testament of Evelyn Rose Whitmore," he began, his voice formal and measured. "Being of sound mind and body." The preliminary bequests were small, expected. A vintage brooch to a cousin. A set of first editions to the local library. A donation to the botanical garden where Evelyn had volunteered for decades. Lucinda's foot tapped impatiently against the Persian rug. "The cottage and its contents," Mr. Carter continued, "including all furniture, books, and personal effects therein." Lucinda leaned forward, a smile already forming on her lips. "I leave to my daughter." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Lucinda's smile remained frozen, waiting for clarification. Surely, he meant Clara. Some legal formality, referring to nieces as daughters. Mr. Carter cleared his throat. "And my primary estate, including all monetary assets, investments, the main residence at 47 Willowbrook Lane, and the sum total of my earthly possessions, I leave to my only daughter, my heart's true child." He paused, looking directly at the corner where Mara stood with the tea tray trembling in her hands. Mara Evelyn. The silence that followed was complete, as if the world itself had stopped to process this impossibility. Mara's legs nearly gave out. The tea tray rattled. Then Clara's voice cracked like a whip. "What?" Lucinda's teacup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. The sound broke the spell, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. "There must be a mistake. She's not her daughter. She's the maid. This is fraud. Check the document again." Mr. Carter remained calm in the storm, pulling out another envelope. "Mrs. Whitmore made this change 3 weeks before her passing. Everything is legal and binding." She was quite specific. "She was senile," Lucinda snarled, standing so quickly her chair toppled backward. "That girl manipulated her. Evelyn had no children." "Mrs. Whitmore, Lucinda, please calm yourself," Mr. Carter said firmly. "Evelyn was examined by Dr. Morrison 2 days before she updated her will. I have his statement confirming her mental acuity." Mara finally found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "There must be. I don't understand. I'm not." Mr. Carter's expression softened as he looked at her. "Miss Mara, Evelyn left you this." He held out another envelope, this one marked in Evelyn's shaking handwriting. "To my daughter, in case I'm gone before I can say it myself." Mara's hands shook as she took it. The paper felt impossibly heavy. "This is ridiculous." Clara was on her feet now, her face red with rage. "She's nobody. She's nothing. We took her in as charity. And apparently," Mr. Carter said quietly, "Evelyn saw fit to correct that injustice." Lucinda turned on Mara, her eyes blazing with a fury that made Mara step back. You did this. You poisoned her against us." "I didn't, I never." "Mrs. Whitmore," Mr. Carter interrupted, "I suggest you seek legal counsel if you wish to contest the will. But I should warn you, Evelyn was very thorough. She anticipated this reaction." He pulled out a tablet and pressed play on a video. Evelyn's face appeared, thin but determined, sitting in this very office. "I, Evelyn Rose Whitmore, being of sound mind, do declare that the contents of my will reflect my true wishes. I am not being coerced. I am not being manipulated. I am simply ensuring that my daughter, yes, my daughter, receives what should have been hers all along. The video Evelyn looked directly at the camera, as if she could see through time to this moment. And to my sister Lucinda, who will no doubt be viewing this in a rage, I say this. You had 16 years to treat that child with kindness. You chose cruelty instead. You had 16 years to see her worth. You chose blindness. Now you will live with the consequences of your choices, as Mara has lived with them all these years. The video ended. The room was silent except for Lucinda's heavy breathing. We'll fight this, she said finally, her voice low and dangerous. We'll destroy you. Mara clutched the letter to her chest, still unable to process what was happening.
Daughter.
Evelyn had called her daughter.
But how? When?
I need air, she managed, stumbling toward the door. The meeting isn't over, Mr. Carter said gently. There are papers to sign, things to explain. But Mara was already in the hallway, her legs carrying her to the bathroom where she locked herself in a stall and finally opened Evelyn's letter with trembling fingers. My dearest Mara, if you are reading this, then I have failed to find the courage to tell you the truth while I still drew breath. Forgive me for my cowardice. Even at the end, I remained too afraid of Lucinda's wrath to speak openly. But the legal truth, at least, I could ensure. When you were 12 years old, I legally adopted you. The words blurred as tears filled Mara's eyes. She had to read the sentence 3 times before it made sense. I filed the papers quietly, using a lawyer in the next county. I knew if Lucinda discovered it, she would have found a way to reverse it or, worse, to punish you for my actions. So, I kept it secret, this precious document that made you mine in the eyes of the law, if not in the eyes of the family. You must understand, my dear one, that I watched you grow up in shadows, serving people who refused to see your light. Every birthday they ignored, I celebrated quietly in my cottage. Every achievement they dismissed, I treasured. Every tear they caused, I wept with you, though you never knew. I was a coward. I should have taken you away from that house the moment I saw how they treated you. But I was old, and Lucinda was vengeful, and I feared what she might do if I tried. So instead, I did what I could. I gave you weapons. Poetry to armor your soul. Chess to sharpen your strategy. Language to expand your world. And now, finally, I give you freedom. The estate is substantial, more than anyone knows. I invested wisely over the years, lived frugally, saved religiously. Not for Lucinda, who already has more than she deserves. Not for Clara, who has never worked a day in her life. But for you, who has worked every day since you were 10 years old. They will fight you. They will try to break you, as they've always tried. But you are stronger than they know. You are my daughter, not by blood but by choice, and that makes our bond more powerful than any accident of birth. Use the money wisely. Not for revenge, that would make you like them, but for freedom, for education, for all the dreams you've had to defer. And know that every time you doubt yourself, every time their voices in your head tell you that you don't deserve this, remember, I chose you. I claimed you. I loved you. All my love, your mother, Evelyn. Mara sank to the bathroom floor, the letter clutched to her chest, and sobbed. Not from sadness, but from a grief so mixed with joy she couldn't separate the threads. Someone had seen her. Someone had claimed her. Someone had called her daughter and meant it. When she finally emerged, eyes red but head high, Mr. Carter was waiting in the hallway. They've gone, he said gently. But they'll be back. With lawyers. Let them come, Mara said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Over the next days, the news spread like wildfire through their small town. Maid inherits millions, the local paper proclaimed. Reporters camped outside the mansion. Lucinda and Clara gave interviews painting Mara as a calculating gold digger who had manipulated a senile old woman. But for every voice raised against her, another rose in support. Mrs. Patterson from the library came forward, telling reporters how Evelyn had spoken of Mara with pride, calling her my daughter for years. The postman revealed that Evelyn had been receiving college brochures and scholarship applications, all addressed to Mara Evelyn, not Mara Johnson, her birth name. Dr. Morrison, Evelyn's physician, held a press conference confirming that Evelyn had been of completely sound mind until the end. She was sharp as a tack, he said firmly. She knew exactly what she was doing. The first legal salvo came quickly. Lucinda hired Baldwin and Associates, the most expensive firm in 3 counties. They filed a motion to contest the will on grounds of undue influence and mental incapacity. Mr. Carter, however, had been right. Evelyn had been thorough. She'd left a paper trail a mile long. Not just the adoption papers, but years of documents referring to Mara as her daughter. Birthday cards she'd bought but never been able to give. A savings account she'd opened in Mara's name when she was 13, steadily depositing money for college. Photos of Mara she'd taken secretly, labeled "My Daughter" on the back. She was building a case, Mr. Carter explained as they prepared for court. She knew this day would come. The night before the first hearing, Mara walked through the mansion, her mansion now, though it felt like trespassing. She found herself in the dining room where she'd served thousands of meals but never eaten. Slowly, deliberately, she sat down at the head of the table. The chair felt strange beneath her, too grand, too important. But as she sat there in the gathering dusk, she heard Evelyn's voice in her memory. "You're not just a maid to me." "No," Mara whispered to the empty room. "I wasn't." Clara found her there an hour later. She stood in the doorway, her usual sneer replaced by something almost like uncertainty. "You must be very pleased with yourself," Clara said, though the venom was half-hearted. "I'm grieving," Mara replied simply. "I lost the only person who ever loved me." Clara flinched. For a moment, her mask slipped, and Mara saw something unexpected: guilt. "She did love you," Clara admitted quietly. "More than us. We all knew it. That's why." She trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish. "That's why you hated me." "Yes." The word came out as barely a whisper. Then, louder, defensive. "You don't understand what it was like. To see her look at you the way she never looked at us. To know the maid was more important than the family." "I wasn't the maid," Mara said firmly. "I was a child. A 10-year-old girl who had just lost her mother. And you all made sure I never forgot I didn't belong." Clara's jaw tightened. "Well, you belong now, don't you? You got everything." "I got a mother," Mara corrected. "The money, the house. None of that matters compared to knowing someone claimed me as their own." Clara stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked away. But at the doorway, she paused. "Mother's going to destroy you in court," she said, not looking back. "She's going to tell them things. True things.
Lies.
Whatever it takes." "What true things?" Mara asked, though her stomach clenched with old fear. Clara turned then, and for the first time in 16 years, she looked directly at Mara, really looked at her, as if seeing her as a person rather than furniture. "That you stole from us once. When you were 14. Mother's jewelry." Mara's breath caught.
She remembered that day.
Hungry, always hungry because Lucinda had been forgetting to leave money for groceries. She'd taken a bracelet, planning to pawn it for food money. But Evelyn had caught her, paid for groceries herself, and made Mara return the bracelet immediately. Lucinda never knew, or so Mara had thought. She knew. Mara whispered. "She's always known. She kept it as insurance," she said. "In case you ever got uppity." Clara's smile was bitter.
"She's going to use it now."
"Proof that you're a thief, that you've always been calculating." "But I was a child. I was hungry. Do you think that matters?" "The narrative matters. The story she tells matters. And she tells it very well." Clara left then, her heels clicking on the marble floors Mara had scrubbed 1,000 times. Mara sat alone in the gathering darkness, Evelyn's letter still in her pocket, and prepared for war. The court hearing was set for the following Monday. Lucinda had assembled a team of 3 lawyers. She'd lined up witnesses, society friends who would testify to Evelyn's declining mental state, former servants who would swear they'd seen Mar manipulating the old woman. But Mara had something more powerful than lawyers or witnesses. She had the truth. And more importantly, she had Evelyn's own words, carefully documented over years. Mr. Carter laid out their defense methodically. The adoption papers, filed and legal. The college fund, showing Evelyn's long-term planning for Mara's future. Letters Evelyn had written to friends, referring to my daughter Mara dating back years. Medical records confirming Evelyn's mental clarity. They can throw all the mud they want, he said. But the facts are on our side. That night, unable to sleep, Mara walked through Evelyn's cottage. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. Books scattered on every surface, chessboard mid-game, a half-finished letter on her desk. Mara picked it up, recognizing her own name at the top. Dearest Mara, tomorrow I plan to tell you everything. I've been a coward for too long. You deserve to know that you are my daughter in every way that matters. You deserve to hear it from my own lips, not from some lawyer after I'm gone. You deserve to know that. The letter ended mid-sentence. Evelyn had died that night, her truth still unspoken. Mara pressed the unfinished letter to her chest and made a decision. She wouldn't let Lucinda's narrative stand. She wouldn't let 16 years of silence continue to define her. Tomorrow in court she would speak, not as the maid, not as the victim, but as Evelyn's daughter. As dawn broke over the estate, her estate, Mara stood in the garden where Evelyn had taught her the names of flowers, where she'd learned that beauty could exist even in the shadow of cruelty. She picked a single rose, red as blood, white as truth, and tucked it into her pocket next to Evelyn's letters. I was never just the maid, she said to the morning sun. And tomorrow, everyone will know it. The war for her inheritance was about to begin, but Mara had already won the only battle that mattered. She knew who she was. She was Mara Evelyn, and she was loved. Everything else was just paperwork. The morning of the hearing arrived wrapped in gray clouds and the threat of rain. Mara dressed carefully in a navy suit Evelyn had bought her 3 years ago, for when you need to show them who you really are, she'd said mysteriously at the time. Now Mara understood. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. Miss Mara, is it true you manipulated Mrs. Whitmore? How does it feel to steal from the family that raised you? Their questions felt like stones thrown at her back, but she kept walking, head high, Evelyn's rose pressed in her pocket. Inside, Lucinda had already taken her position, flanked by her legal team like a general with her war council. She wore black, a calculated choice, Mara realized, to paint herself as the grieving sister robbed of her inheritance. Clara sat behind her, designer sunglasses hiding her eyes despite the gray day. All rise for the Honorable Judge Catherine Morrison, the bailiff announced. Judge Morrison was a small woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed the papers before her with methodical precision before looking up. We're here to determine the validity of Evelyn Whitmore's last will and testament. Mrs. Lucinda Whitmore contests on grounds of undue influence and mental incapacity. Mr. Baldwin, you may begin. Lucinda's lead attorney stood, his three-piece suit impeccable, his voice resonating with practiced authority. Your Honor, we intend to show that Evelyn Whitmore, in her declining years, was systematically manipulated by a member of her household staff who preyed upon her loneliness and confusion. He painted a picture that was almost believable, Mara as a calculating opportunist, biding her time, isolating Evelyn from her real family, poisoning her mind against her own sister and niece. He presented affidavits from society friends who claimed Evelyn had seemed confused at recent gatherings, obsessed with Mara in an unhealthy way. Then came the bombshell Mara had been dreading. Furthermore, Your Honor, we have evidence that Miss Johnson, she never legally changed her name to Evelyn, has a history of theft. When she was 14, she stole valuable jewelry from Mrs. Lucinda Whitmore. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Mara felt the heat of judgment on her neck. This establishes a pattern. Baldwin continued smoothly. A pattern of taking what doesn't belong to her, of coveting the Whitmore wealth, of planning for years to steal not just objects, but an entire inheritance. When it was Mr. Carter's turn, he stood slowly, deliberately, letting the theatrics settle before speaking in a calm, measured tone. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence that Evelyn Whitmore legally adopted Mara when she was 12 years old. He handed the bailiff a thick folder. These are the original adoption papers, filed in Berkshire County to avoid family interference. They are legal and binding. Judge Morrison reviewed the papers, her expression neutral. These appear to be in order. Why were they filed in another county? If I may, Your Honor, Mr. Carter said, I'd like to call Dr. Patricia Henley, who served as the social worker overseeing the adoption. Dr. Henley, now in her 70s, took the stand with dignity. Her testimony was devastating to Lucinda's case. Evelyn came to me concerned about Mara's living situation, she testified. She documented instances of neglect. The child was being used as unpaid labor, denied educational opportunities, isolated from peers. Evelyn wanted to protect her legally, but feared her sister's retaliation. Why didn't she remove Mara from the home? Judge Morrison asked. She tried. But Mrs. Lucinda Whitmore threatened to make false allegations against Evelyn if she attempted it. She said she'd claim Evelyn was senile, unfit. Evelyn was 73 at the time and feared she wouldn't win a direct confrontation. So she chose legal adoption as a safeguard, planning to reveal it when Mara came of age. But she never did, Baldwin interjected. No, Dr. Henley agreed sadly. She was afraid. But she made sure Mara would be protected eventually. The next witness was Dr. Morrison, no relation to the judge, Evelyn's physician. Mrs. Evelyn Whitmore's mental faculties were completely intact until her death, he stated firmly. I performed cognitive assessments monthly in her final year, at her request. She scored in the superior range every time. She was sharper than most people half her age. Then how do you explain witnesses saying she seemed confused? Baldwin pressed. Dr. Morrison's expression hardened. I'd explain it as willful misinterpretation by people who had something to gain from her being declared incompetent. Then came the character witnesses. The librarian, Mrs. Patterson, testified about Evelyn's pride in Mara, how she'd referred to her as my daughter for years. The gardener, Thomas, revealed that Evelyn had paid him extra to teach Mara botany because she wanted her daughter to understand beauty. Even the postman testified about the college materials, the birthday cards Evelyn had him deliver to his own address and then secretly bring back because she was afraid to give them openly. But Lucinda's side had ammunition too. Former servants testified that Mara had too much influence over Evelyn. Society friends swore Evelyn had become obsessed with Mara inappropriately. Then Lucinda herself took the stand. She was the picture of wounded dignity, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief as she spoke of her beloved sister and how that girl had driven a wedge between them. She was always lurking, Lucinda said, her voice breaking artfully. Always whispering in Evelyn's ear. She turned my sister against her own blood. Mrs. Whitmore, Judge Morrison interjected, were you aware that your sister had legally adopted Mara? Lucinda's pause was telling. That's impossible. Evelyn would have told me. So you were not aware? There was no adoption, Lucinda insisted, but her voice had lost some of its certainty. The legal documents suggest otherwise. Mrs. Whitmore, how did Mara come to live in your household? We took her in as an act of charity when her mother died. We raised her. How did you raise her? We provided room and board, education. What education? Mr. Carter interrupted. Our records show Mara was pulled from school at 16 to work full-time in your household. She was needed at home. As what? As help. As unpaid help. For 10 years. Lucinda's composure cracked. We gave her everything. A roof over her head, food, clothing. You gave her servitude, Mr. Carter said quietly. And your sister gave her love. That's why she inherited, Mrs. Whitmore. Not because she manipulated anyone, but because Evelyn saw what you did to a child and tried to make it right. That child was a thief. Lucinda burst out. She stole from me. Judge Morrison raised an eyebrow. When she was 14. My gold bracelet. Did you report it to the police?
No.
I handled it internally.
How?
Lucinda's silence spoke volumes. Mr. Carter stood. Your Honor, I'd like to present a receipt from Berkshire Pawn Shop, dated the same week as this alleged theft. It shows Evelyn Whitmore pawning and then immediately buying back a gold bracelet. She paid for it herself to protect a hungry child who made a desperate mistake. That proves nothing, Lucinda snarled, her mask fully slipped now. But then Clara stood up in the gallery. Mother, stop. Everyone turned. Clara removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes red from crying. Your Honor, she said, her voice shaking. May I speak? Judge Morrison nodded. Clara took the stand, avoiding her mother's burning gaze. My mother is lying, she said simply. Aunt Evelyn was completely sound of mind. She knew exactly what she was doing. She loved Mara more than she loved us, and we all knew it. We hated her for it. We made her life miserable for it. But it was true. Clara. Lucinda gasped. I'm tired of lying, Clara continued, tears streaming down her face. I'm tired of pretending we were the victims. We weren't. Mara was. She was a child, and we treated her like a slave. Aunt Evelyn was the only one who saw it was wrong. She looked directly at Mara for the first time in years. I used to read her diary. For fun. I'd mock her handwriting, her dreams of going to college. I'd laugh with my friends about the maid, who thought she was somebody.
But she was somebody.
Aunt Evelyn saw it. And deep down we all saw it too. That's why we tried so hard to break her. The courtroom was silent. Lucinda looked like she'd been slapped. I'm sorry, Clara said to Mara. It doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. Judge Morrison called a recess. When they returned, her verdict was swift and decisive. The court finds no evidence of undue influence or mental incapacity. The adoption papers are legal and binding. Evelyn Whitmore's will stand as written. Her entire estate passes to her legally adopted daughter, Mara Evelyn. Lucinda erupted. This is corruption. You're all against me. That girl is nothing. She's nobody. She doesn't deserve. Mrs. Whitmore, Judge Morrison said coldly, you're in contempt. One more outburst, and you'll be fined and removed from my courtroom. But Lucinda was beyond caring. She's a manipulative little. Bailiff, remove Mrs. Whitmore. She's fined $5,000 for contempt and banned from harassing the plaintiff. As Lucinda was escorted out, still screaming about injustice, Mara sat in stunned silence. It was over. She'd won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the end of a war, where everyone had lost something. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Not reporters this time, but people from the community. Mrs. Patterson from the library. Thomas the gardener. The boy she'd tutored in reading. They began to clap, quietly at first, then louder. We're glad for you, Mrs. Patterson said, squeezing her hand. Evelyn would be so proud. The mansion felt different when Mara returned, not because anything had changed, but because she had. She walked through the front door, not the service entrance. She climbed the main staircase, not the back stairs. She entered Evelyn's room, her room now, and sat at the desk where Evelyn had written her letters. In the drawer, she found another envelope, hidden beneath old photographs. Inside was a second letter and a bank statement showing an account with $500,000 untouched for years. Use it well. For your own life. Not theirs. Mara stared at the number, unable to process it. Evelyn hadn't just given her an inheritance, she'd given her a future, carefully planned and protected. The next morning, she called Lucinda. Come to the house, she said. Bring Clara. We need to talk. They arrived that afternoon, Lucinda stiff with rage, Clara subdued and uncertain. Mara met them in the formal living room neutral ground. I won't forget what you did, Mara said calmly. 16 years of servitude. Of cruelty. Of making me feel like nothing. I won't forget any of it. Lucinda's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. But I won't become you either, Mara continued. I won't let bitterness poison me the way it poisoned you. I won't pass on the cruelty. How magnanimous, Lucinda said acidly. I'm going to change things, Mara said, ignoring the sarcasm. This house, Evelyn's money. I'm going to use it the way she would have wanted. The way she dreamed. She pulled out a folder, spreading architectural plans on the coffee table. The East Wing will become a literacy center. Free tutoring, a library, computer access for kids who need it. The West Wing will house a small museum of Evelyn's collections, her books, her letters, her photographs. The gardens will be open to the public. Clara leaned forward despite herself. You're turning it into what? A community center? I'm turning it into what it should have been, Mara said. A place where children aren't invisible. Where they're seen, valued, educated. Where they matter. You're destroying our family legacy, Lucinda hissed. No, Mara said firmly. I'm creating Evelyn's legacy. The Evelyn Foundation for Literacy and Learning. Clara was crying again, silently this time. She would have loved that. I know, Mara said softly. Lucinda stood abruptly. If you think this makes you better than us. I don't think anything about you anymore, Mara interrupted. You're not my burden to carry. You're not my family to please. You're just someone who used to have power over me. That's all. The words landed like blows. Lucinda left without another word, but Clara lingered. I want to help, she said quietly. I know I don't deserve. I know you have no reason to trust me. But Aunt Evelyn loved books. She tried to share that with me once, but I was too proud to listen. Maybe I could volunteer? At the literacy center? Mara studied her for a long moment. We'll see, she said finally. Change takes time. For all of us. Over the next months, the transformation began. Contractors and architects swarmed the mansion, but Mara was careful to preserve Evelyn's cottage exactly as it was, a shrine to the woman who'd saved her. The newspaper that had once called her a gold digger now ran a different headline. Adopted daughter honors quiet matriarch's legacy. The story had shifted. Mara was no longer the maid who'd stolen millions, but the daughter who was using her inheritance to lift others. The day of the foundation's opening, hundreds came. Not just the wealthy patrons Lucinda would have courted, but families from the neighborhood, children clutching library cards, teenagers who'd heard about the free tutoring programs. Mara stood at the podium, her hands shaking slightly. She'd written and rewritten her speech a dozen times, but when she looked out at the crowd, she spoke from her heart instead. I used to think my voice didn't matter, she began, her voice soft but clear. I spent 16 years believing I was invisible, that I existed only to serve others' needs. But someone saw me. Someone claimed me. Someone believed I deserved more than shadows and silence. She could see Clara in the crowd, wearing a volunteer badge. Thomas the gardener was there, Mrs. Patterson, Dr. Henley. All the people who'd stood witness to her truth. Evelyn Whitmore was my mother in every way that mattered. Not by blood, but by choice. She chose to love me when no one else would. She chose to protect me even when it meant keeping secrets. She chose to give me a future even when she couldn't give me a present. Her voice grew stronger. This foundation is her dream realized. Every child who walks through these doors will know what I didn't for so long, that they matter, that their dreams are valid, that their voices deserve to be heard. Some people are born into families, she continued. Others have to find them. Others have to build them. Evelyn built a family of two, her and me, in quiet defiance of those who said I didn't belong. Now I'm building a family of hundreds, maybe thousands, in loud declaration that everyone belongs somewhere. The applause was thunderous. As Mara cut the ribbon, she felt Evelyn's presence, like sunshine on her shoulders. She'd done it. She'd transformed a house of servitude into a home of service. That evening, as the last families left and the sun set over the gardens, Clara approached her. I've been coming to therapy, she said without preamble, to understand why I was so cruel, why I enjoyed your pain. Mara said nothing, letting her speak. The therapist says it was about power. About feeling powerless under my mother's thumb and taking it out on the only person with less power than me. It doesn't excuse it. Nothing excuses it. But I wanted you to know I'm trying to understand. To change. Why? Mara asked. Clara was quiet for a moment. Because I saw something at the trial. When you won, you didn't smile. You didn't celebrate. You just looked tired. And I realized we'd stolen something from you that no amount of money could give back. We stole your childhood, your peace, your ability to trust. And I have to live with that. She pulled out a small wrapped package. This isn't an apology. It's too small for that. But I found these in Mother's room, and I thought you should have them. Inside were photographs.
Dozens of them.
All of Mara, taken secretly over the years. Mara at 12, reading in the garden. Mara at 15, helping Thomas with the roses. Mara at 18, walking to the library. On the back of each, in Evelyn's handwriting, "My daughter." She was documenting your life, Clara said. All the moments we ignored, she was capturing, building evidence that you were hers. Mara traced a finger over a photo of herself at 20, caught mid-laugh at something Evelyn had said. She didn't remember the moment, but the joy on her face was real. "Thank you," she said quietly. Clara nodded and turned to leave, then paused. Mother won't come around. She's too proud, too bitter. She'd rather lose everything than admit she was wrong. But I want to be different. If you'll let me. "We'll see," Mara said again. But this time, there was a tiny opening in the words, a possibility of something that might, one day, resemble forgiveness. A month after the foundation opened, a woman appeared at Mara's door. She was in her 60s, with graying hair and kind eyes that looked familiar somehow. "Mara," she said, "my name is Patricia Jennings. I knew your mother, your birth mother." The world tilted. Mara had thought that chapter of her life was closed, buried with the woman who died when she was 10. "May I come in?" Patricia asked. They sat in Evelyn's cottage, surrounded by books and memories. Patricia pulled out a worn envelope. "Sarah, your mother, was my best friend. We grew up together. When she got sick, she made me promise to check on you. But by the time I got back from overseas, you were already here. Lucinda wouldn't let me see you. Said you were adjusting and didn't need confusion." She handed Mara the envelope. "Sarah wrote this when she knew she was dying. She wanted you to have it when you were old enough to understand." Mara's hands trembled as she opened it. "My precious Mara, if you're reading this, then I've failed at the one thing I wanted most, to watch you grow up. I'm so sorry, baby girl. Sorry for leaving you. Sorry for not being stronger. Sorry for trusting the wrong people with your care. I begged Lucinda to take you, because I had no one else. My family was gone, your father was never in the picture, and I was desperate. But I knew Lucinda was cold. That's why I also begged Evelyn. If Lucinda fails her, I said, please step in. Please be what I can't be. I don't know what your life has become. I pray you're loved, valued, educated. I pray someone sees the light in you that I see, the intelligence, the kindness, the strength that amazes me even at 10 years old. Know this, you are wanted. You are loved. You are my greatest achievement and my deepest joy. Whatever life has brought you, whatever struggles you faced, you are Sarah Johnson's daughter, and that means you are fierce and brilliant and capable of anything. I love you beyond words, beyond time, beyond death itself."
"Mama."
Mara sobbed, pressing the letter to her chest. 2 mothers. She'd had 2 mothers who loved her, even if one couldn't stay and the other couldn't speak freely. "There's more," Patricia said gently. "Your mother's family, there are cousins in Georgia.
"Aunts."
They've been looking for you for years, but Lucinda always said you didn't want contact." "She lied," Mara whispered. "I know. They want to meet you, when you're ready. You have a whole family who never forgot about Sarah's little girl." Over the following weeks, Mara slowly reached out. Phone calls at first, then video chats. Her mother's sister, Aunt Joyce, cried when she saw her face. "You look just like her," she said. "Just like our Sarah." They sent photos of her mother as a child, as a teenager, as a young woman before illness stole her strength. They shared stories of her humor, her stubbornness, her dreams of becoming a teacher. "She would be so proud," Aunt Joyce said during one call, "to see what you've become, what you've overcome, what you're building." Mara flew to Georgia for Thanksgiving, her first real family holiday in 16 years. They welcomed her like she'd never been gone, like those lost years were just a pause, not an ending. Her cousin's children called her Aunt Mara. Her aunts cooked her mother's recipes. They showed her the family albums, the history she'd been denied. "You're a Johnson," Uncle Robert said firmly. "Always have been, always will be. But you're also an Evelyn, and that's beautiful too. That woman saved you when we couldn't. We're grateful to her." When Mara returned home, she found Clara waiting at the foundation, teaching a group of children to read. She'd been coming every day, quietly, without fanfare. "How is Georgia?" Clara asked. "Like finding pieces of myself I didn't know were missing," Mara replied. Clara nodded. "I've been thinking about names. How Mother always called you the girl, or Mara, but never your full name. Never Mara Johnson. Like she was erasing half of you." "She was," Mara said simply. "And now you're Mara Evelyn. You chose that." "Evelyn chose it first. I just accepted it." Clara was quiet for a moment. "You could be both, you know. Mara Johnson Evelyn. Carry both mothers with you." The suggestion hung in the air between them, an offering of understanding from someone who was finally learning to see. Mara considered it. Sarah Johnson, who gave her life. Evelyn Whitmore, who gave her a future. Both women who loved her in their own ways, within their own limitations. "Maybe," she said. "Maybe I will." That spring, the foundation hosted its first graduation ceremony. 20 children who'd learned to read, 15 teenagers who'd passed their GEDs, 10 adults who'd completed job training programs. Mara stood at the podium again, more confident now, her voice clear and strong. "Every person in this room knows what it's like to be overlooked," she said. "To be told you don't matter. To believe, maybe, that it's true. But look around you. Look at what you've accomplished. Look at who you've become." In the audience, she saw the boy from the library, now enrolled in community college. She saw Mrs. Patterson, retired but volunteering every day. She saw Thomas, teaching urban gardening to teenagers who'd never seen anything grow. And in the back, almost hidden, she saw Lucinda. Their eyes met across the room. Lucinda looked older, smaller somehow. The power she'd wielded like a weapon had dissolved, leaving only a bitter woman who'd lost more than money. She'd lost her daughter's respect, her sister's love, her own sense of superiority. Mara didn't smile at her, didn't acknowledge her beyond that single glance. But she didn't have her removed either. Let her see, Mara thought. Let her see what Evelyn's love built. "You are not your circumstances," Mara continued her speech. "You are not your struggles. You are not what others say you are. You are who you choose to become. And today, you've chosen to become educated, empowered, extraordinary." As the graduates walked across the stage, accepting their certificates, Mara thought about the journey that had brought her here. From servant to daughter. From invisible to seen. From silenced to speaker of truths. After the ceremony, as families celebrated and children ran through the gardens that had once been forbidden to her, Clara approached with someone new, a woman her age with a baby in her arms. "This is my partner, Rebecca," Clara said nervously. "And our daughter, Eve." Mara looked at the baby, named for Evelyn, and felt something shift in her chest. Another generation. Another chance. "She's beautiful," Mara said, and meant it. "We want her to grow up differently," Clara said. "To know that everyone has value. That service isn't servitude. That family isn't about blood, but about choosing to show up." "Then bring her here," Mara said. "Let her grow up surrounded by books and dreams and possibilities." As the sun set over the estate, the foundation now, Mara walked through the gardens alone. She stopped at the spot where she'd planted a hibiscus for Evelyn, now blooming brilliant red. "You gave me the world," she said quietly to the flowers, to the air, to the memory of the woman who'd seen her when no one else would. "Now I'm giving it to others." A voice came from behind her, Patricia Jennings, who'd become a regular volunteer. "Your mother would be proud," she said. "Both of them." Mara smiled, a real smile, full and unguarded. "I know." As she walked back to the cottage, her home now, truly hers, she thought about the girl who'd scrubbed these floors, invisible, and aching to matter. That girl was still part of her, would always be part of her. But she was no longer defined by her servitude. She was Mara Johnson Evelyn, daughter to two mothers, builder of foundations, speaker of truths, transformer of pain into purpose. She was at last exactly who she was meant to be. The end. In the final scene, we see a montage. Children reading in the library that was once Lucinda's proud sitting room. Teenagers practicing chess, where Clara had once mocked Mara's worn clothes. Adults learning job skills in the kitchen where Mara had cooked thousands of meals she was never allowed to share. And through it all, Mara moves with quiet authority, no longer serving but service-minded, no longer invisible but choosing when to be seen, no longer silent but knowing when words matter most. The last image, a photograph on the mantel of the cottage, 3 women. Sarah Johnson, young and vibrant before illness struck. Evelyn Whitmore, elderly but fierce in her love. And Mara, standing between their portraits, carrying both their legacies forward into a future they'd sacrificed to give her. Below the photograph, a simple plaque. They brought me in as a maid. But love made me a daughter. And choice made me myself. Have you ever wondered if the people we overlook every day might be the ones most deserving of being seen? And what would happen if someone finally chose to truly see them? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of hidden truths, unlikely inheritances, and the power of being claimed by love rather than blood.